Here's the thing that I think a lot of people need to realize. You can do racist things and not consider yourself to be racist. The thing is that there are blind spots within everybody. Even a lot of us black people, we have internalized white supremacy, right? I have it, you have it, everybody has it. I don't care if you deny it, you have it. Everybody has internalized white supremacy. The problem is that a lot of white people do not realize it as well, and it will go unchecked. And so because this goes unchecked, then you will automatically think, well, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just stating the facts. When in reality, you're putting an individual problem. You're putting a systemic problem on an individual. Black students singled out. You know, I live in Florida, and Flagler County is not that far away from me, as many people know. And as a black person living in Florida, this really hit me because I know what it's like to be that little kid. And to feel singled out has to be deeply abandoning. So I'm going to share an article really quick with you guys, and we'll get into it. Because a lot of black people are pissed off. So this is from the local news, Channel 9. It says Flagler schools criticized for hosting assembly that singled out black elementary students. So this was earlier last week. And it says the Flagler School District is apologizing after parents say an assembly held Friday singled out black students at Bunnell Elementary School. The district said they were trying to encourage the group of 4th and 5th graders to perform better on test scores. Two mothers said their children were told that if they didn't do well on their upcoming tests, they could end up dead or in jail. How in the world do you say something like that to a kid because of their test scores? Let's continue. The article goes forward. It says the district has not confirmed that specifically what was said to the students, but did admit the assembly was only for black students and does not meet district standards. Why in the world would you do this to only black students? It says the PowerPoint page of a PowerPoint presentation used during the assembly was titled "The Problem," followed by a bullet point that says, quote, African Americans have underperformed on standardized assessment for the past 3 years. Only 32% are at level 3 or higher. Other slides offered competitions as solutions and fast food incentives for students who got their scores up. Jacinda Arrington and Alex Smith said not only were the children singled out, parents weren't warned or given a chance to prepare their children for their conversation. And so as far as we can see, there's a lot of anti-blackness that's happening in Florida, and people are really in outrage. And so this is one of the biggest stories that I have seen in as far as race goes within Central Florida. And Flagler is in Central Florida. So let's go to this article. Sorry, let's go to this. Let's go to this here. And it gives a little bit more detail. And then I'll do some commenting, on and off throughout. But let's go.
On Fox 35, a special meeting was held tonight in Flagler County. Parents got the chance to speak one-on-one with the school superintendent after black students were singled out at an assembly. Fox 35, Stephanie Buffalanti is joining us live from Bunnell Elementary tonight. So, Stephanie, what did those parents have to say?
Those parents tell me that they're giving the school one chance to make things right. Those parents, teachers, and the school superintendent all came together tonight to look at how we move forward from this.
I want to know, ask his mother, what are you all doing next?
Parents at Bunnell Elementary looking to see what the district is going to do after the school held a special assembly for only Black students to talk about improving test scores last week.
When I came into the meeting, I was still irate about the situation. No matter about the press conference, the phone calls, the emails I've had, I was still mad because the situation still happened. You can't erase it.
Parents spoke with Flagler County School Interim Superintendent LaShaka Moore about their concerns at a PTO meeting Thursday.
Actions are going to be important because this broke a lot of our trust. So we need to see what they're going to do. Is really on the school to make amends with the parents, the students, and the community.
Yesterday, I spoke with a fourth grader who told me the teacher told students this in the assembly.
I didn't like how we said that if we don't get good high scores that we could get shot, dead, or end up on jail or the side of the road. Made me feel really uncomfortable and unsafe.
Tonight, one parent.
There has to be a reckoning for something like this. And you're basically telling kids that if you don't pass this test, this standardized test, that this is what your future is going to be. This is a fear tactic that is being used by a school in order to get better test scores. I thought, maybe it's just me, that the goal was to actually teach kids, not scare them into submission, not scare them into compliance. And yet, this is what's going on at Bunnell Elementary. You have 9 and 10-year-olds being scared out of their mind because teachers and administrators are saying, if you don't pass this test, you're going to wind up dead. Are you serious right now? Are you kidding me? This is crazy. And never mind the fact that standardized testing actually has racist roots. Don't believe me? I'll show you. So let me share this with you guys really quick. And then we can go back to that video. So race and class intertwine, and ultimately it's about class and keeping Black people as an underclass. And so this is why we need to constantly be vigilant when it comes to looking at race and class across the board and consistently. Unfortunately, for poor white people, they're caught in the crossfire as well because they're subject to these standardized testings too. And a lot of times it is disproportionate for them. So this is out of the Tribune. It says standardized testing is a perpetuation of white supremacy. Yes. Yes, people. Let's get into it. It says, as students near the end of their degrees, whether high school or university, many opt to continue their education. And for those whose dreams involve college and in the United States, law school or medical school, a terrifying barrier entry stands in their way. Standardized tests. Despite being known for their difficulty, the most troubling characteristics are often overlooked, including their racist origins and the way they systematically impede marginalized people's access to further education. A system conceived to benefit wealthy white men, standardized testing has continued to create additional barriers to entry for those who are already disadvantaged by the institutionalized racism present in most universities. The fight for equal access and opportunity to post-secondary education must include the removal of standardized testing from the process. Now, it's going to get into, this is actually going to get into the background, or it's going to get into the origins of standardized testing and why it has the racist roots that it has. So as we get into it, it says the precursor to most standardized tests was Scholastic Aptitude Test, the SAT. Adapted from the Army Alpha test that was supposed to evaluate future cognitive abilities, but in reality, reinforced white male cultural biases. The College Board Commission called Brigham and noted white supremacist, anti-immigrant eugenicist, and segregationist to create the SAT. His research claimed that African Americans were on the low end of a supposed racial, ethnic, and cultural hierarchy. Hence, the creation of standardized tests is inextricably tied to intellectual racism, separating different intelligence levels under the guise of science to falsely separate races. So basically, it was a means to segregate, to make white people look like they were the more superior race intellectually. And so this is what's behind the fact about standardized testing. And they're basically telling little black boys and girls that if you do not pass this test, you're going to die? How is that right? So let's get back into this cluster F. I'm trying to be more personal in my language, but let's continue.
Tonight, one parent asked the superintendent,
do you believe what they said to be true?
I don't believe that. But regardless of if I did or if anybody else does, that is absolutely inappropriate and out of line for a school environment. You don't send them.
So the gentleman asked if do the teachers that said this, did they believe that what they said was true? If you're going to sit up in front of 200, 300, 400, 500 children, black children, knowing the history, the racist history of standardized testing, and you tell them, if you don't pass this test, you're going to wind up dead. If you got up, made this presentation and did that, that tells me something about the teacher or teachers and administrators within Bunnell Elementary. I mean, honestly, my question is, why aren't heads rolling? So I just want to get a little bit deeper into the racist history about standardized testing. I may end up going a little bit longer on my segment than I wanted to, but that's okay because this is a very important story. But anywho, let's go. So I'm going to share this really quick with you. All right. So I'm going to share this, that this is from an educator that is taught on the college, high school, middle, and elementary school level. So let's go. All right.
Watch this video for context and understanding for what I'm about to say. I'm gonna make this short, quick, brief. Do it how I do it. My first reaction to this is F them schools, F that county, and F standardized test. And I say this as a 25-year educator who have taught on every level from the elementary school, middle school, high school, and now for the last 10 years on the college level. Standardized tests have a history of being anti-Black, and we have the data to prove that. You know, African Americans generally score worse on standardized tests across the board. And of course, there's exceptions to every rule, but on median, on the average, most African Americans generally do not score that well in these standardized tests. And the reason isn't that surprising. Why? Because these tests are inherently racist and their beginnings began from racism. One of the, I guess you would say, fathers of the American standardized test movement is a eugenicist and a psychologist named Carl Brigham. Carl Brigham was well known, very popular back in the early part of the 20th century. And when I say eugenicist, he was a person who advocated for eugenics. And if you don't know much about eugenics, go and do the research on that. It was a terrible thing that was happening in this country, but in short, people were being forced, sterilized, and other ways to try to make this country more white and get rid of ethnic diversity in the United States. It was hugely popular. Over 95 states had laws, so this was a very legal practice. And this is also what influenced the Nazis to do the Holocaust. Jim Crow in the South and James Crow in the North, and the racial segregation and the American eugenics movement is the direct cause, or I should say the direct influence of the Holocaust. So this right here is a quote from the 1923 book written by Brigham called A Study of American Intelligence, in which he looked at the American different diversity in America and the different intelligence levels. And in his book, he wrote that African Americans were on the low end of the racial, ethnic, or cultural spectrum. And he believed that testing, standardized testing, would show that the superiority of the Nordic race, which the superiority of white people over others. And he warned of the promiscuous intermingling of new immigrants and Black people in the American gene pool. So he not only advocated purification of the genetic race, white race, he also advocated standardized testing to prove that this should be done. So he was very anti-Black. Brigham had helped to develop aptitude tests for the United States Army in World War I. If you know the history about African Americans in World War I, which I might do a video on, it was a terrible experience for these soldiers because they were treated just like, pretty much they were treated terribly, horribly during that First World War.
Kind of like these kids in Bunnell Elementary. How they're being treated by teachers who are supposed to teach and protect the students. Sounds pretty horrible. So let's get into the more details, because the thing is that this racist history is pretty consistent history as far as we know as regards to how it has been implemented. So there's another TikTok that I want to share, and this actually goes over the details a little bit further. And let me share that with you guys before I continue. Let me see. All right. Let me share that with you guys. All right. There we go. You got it. All right. So let's enlarge and go.
The perfect example of why you need systemic critique of the entire education system and what happens to schools when you remove the ability to train against implicit bias. For those that haven't heard, Flagler County Schools had an elementary school that called out all Black 4th and 5th graders to an assembly to discuss their test scores. They didn't call out all low performing students, and it just so happened that all the low performing students were Black. No. They literally called out all of the Black students and then told them what the problem was. The slideshow they shared said that the problem is that African Americans have underperformed on standardized assessment for the past 3 years, and only 32% are at the level 3 or higher. I would like to.
So here's my question. Why not just get all underperforming students and talk to them? This includes the Latino, white, and Asian students at the school. Why are you just singling out Black students? Because if you want to encourage all the lower performing students to do better, then you bring them all to the assembly in order to talk about it. You don't just bring one racial group to do this, because if you're bringing one racial group to do this, then you're essentially saying that by virtue of your race, that this is why you underperform, because you're Black and you need to do better. You need to fight against your dark skin in order to do better. Like, what? What a way to take a gut punch to a kid's self-esteem. What a way to really influence internalize anti-blackness into a child. You're going to tell them that? Let's continue.
I'd like to state that this last sentence argues that it shouldn't have been all Black students called into this assembly in the first place, because obviously there are some that are at a level 3 or higher. But the way that the problem itself is phrased as African American students have underperformed implies that it is the fault of Black students that they are underperforming, which is actually an insane talking point, speaking as a math teacher, especially considering the new laws that states like Florida, Arkansas, Texas, and the like are passing, in which you're not even allowed to imply that there is a difference between one group of students versus another. To frame the problem as an underperformance done by the Black students does not take into account any other factors that could be potentially creating a disparity between these. Correlation does not imply causation. Just because these two groups score differently does not mean that it is the fault of one group that they score different. Actually,
and he makes a great point, because ultimately, when it comes to the socioeconomic status of Black people, we're typically in higher poverty rates as a group. There is a greater number of us in poverty simply because Black people are in underclass. We are a second class within this system. And so when you place us in that class, what ends up happening is that we do underperform on some of these tests because we don't have the same resources that more white kids in schools have. Yes, there are poor white kids, but there is a lower ratio of poor white kids and people than there is among poor Black people, because unfortunately we are an underclass. And that's how it was from the outset that we were brought over to this country to now. 400 years worth. We have 400 years of research. And so by telling little Black boys and girls and kids that, oh, it's because you're Black and you just need to do better, what is that telling them? That's telling them that no matter how they do in life, they always have to fight by virtue of them being Black, and it's placing the blame on them rather than placing the blame on the system, because it's not them, and it's always placed as an individual problem with an individual solution, when in reality it's a systemic problem that requires a systemic solution. And they're very blind to this.
Studies show that most standardized testing favors white students in general, especially if those white students have a higher socioeconomic status than their peers, which is why I say structural critique has to exist within the education system, because you need to be able to compare the data from this test score, all right, these 3 years of test scores from the school, to all standardized testing scores. When you do that, you get a much clearer picture that most testing favors white students, which implies that there is bias towards white students in the system of standardized testing, or even a difference between the level of education that white students receive versus Black students in the same classes. And the thing is, the school district claims that this wasn't really a purposeful event, that they shouldn't have done this and it was a mistake, basically. But you can't just, whoops, we accidentally told all the Black students that it's their fault they're doing bad on test scores. Presentations are planned. There was a slideshow. Someone sat down, wrote out what they were going to say, and practiced it. At the very least, you knew what that looked like. But then you take into account the fact that they told these students in this assembly that the lower you perform on test scores, the more likely you are to end up in jail or dying of gun violence. And it becomes a much clearer picture. The people working at this school who created this presentation and gave it to these students are racist. There is no other explanation. It doesn't matter if they were actively trying to be racist towards these students or if they were just unchecked in their racial biases and projecting them onto the kids. It doesn't matter. All right. Those are racist things that they did. And
that's the point. Here's the thing that I think a lot of people need to realize. You can do racist things and not consider yourself to be racist. The thing is that there are blind spots within everybody. Even a lot of us black people, we have internalized white supremacy, right? I have it, you have it, everybody has it. I don't care if you deny it, you have it. Everybody has internalized white supremacy. The problem is that a lot of white people do not realize it as well, and it will go unchecked. And so because this goes unchecked, then you will automatically think, well, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just stating the facts. When in reality, you're putting an individual problem, you're putting a systemic problem on an individual. And you also do not realize that you as a white person benefit from this system. So therefore, if it's good for you, then you're going to sit here going, well, why can't everybody else do good? I'm doing good. That's like being a fish in water and you're looking at the bird that is drowning and you go, why are you drowning? Everything's good. Stop playing around. Stop lying to yourself. Like, how are you going to do that? See, that's the thing. The environment is perfect for you, but it is not an equal or equitable environment for the rest of us. You can't sit here and do that. And so this is why all of us need to check this bias. All of us. I have to check my biases. You have to check yours. And so this is why you have people, teachers and administrators that are doing presentations like this to Black children in a school like Bunnell Elementary, because they didn't do that work. They didn't check their own biases. And then they put this out and possibly emotionally and psychologically hurt little kids. Ultimately, doing the work means that you are preventing yourself from harming other people, especially marginalized groups. We have to take the prickliness off of ourselves. We have to make ourselves safer for more marginalized groups. Because ultimately, it's about treating humanity equally and equitably with justice. And if you're not interested in that, then of course you're not going to do that work. And the work has to be done by all of us. I don't care who you are. So there was an apology that was made, and I would like to share that apology because that also is contextual in this story as well. Because the Flagler County School District did jump into action, which a lot of people are applauding regarding this story. And so I'm going to go to that right now, and then we're going to see the apology that was given by the interim superintendent. Let's go.
Good morning, everyone. I certainly wish I was not standing here at this moment at this particular time under these circumstances. Flagler Schools, they gave me a script. I'm going to read it, but you're going to hear a little bit from me too at the same time. The district does not in any way support the activity that took place at Bunnell Elementary School. To the parents and students affected by these actions of Flagler County community, we make no excuses, but extend our apology, all of our apologies. It should not have happened. If we had known about it, it wouldn't have happened. But it came to knowledge after the fact. So please understand that clearly. The district believes communication and parental involvement is essential components needed to meet the individual students and their needs. The district mission and vision is to ensure all students, let me repeat that, all students graduate and socially responsible citizens and skills necessary to reach maximum potential.
One of the things I want to bring out as well is that because of this mess that was created by Bunnell Elementary, this adds on to the anti-Blackness that we experience here in Florida day after day. Look at the governor of this state, Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis has made it so that our free speech has been stifled. He's made it so that as far as African American studies, he's put a nix on that. A lot of the books that are being banned are books about African American achievement within this country, about African American inventors, movements, slavery. These things are being either suppressed or banned entirely within this state. 9 and 10-year-olds are not dumb. They have ears, they have eyes, and they have hearts. And they hear what their parents talk about. They hear and see what's going on in schools. They see some of the school personnel coming in and taking some of the books that feature people who look just like them and get taken away. They see it. If you don't think they do, they do. They are much more smarter than people give them credit for. Children are brilliant. They can put 2 and 2 together. And so adding this on top of it, look what you did. And how many kids were this? Bunnell Elementary, an average elementary has what, about 350 students? Something like that. Maybe more, between 350 and 500 students. And let's just say hypothetically, a third of the population is Black, just a third. That may be about 100 to 150 kids. So doing that, that can emotionally and mentally tear them apart. Let's continue.
Flagler School Board does not support segregation. It hasn't. Not this group, not for many, many, many years. So please understand, yes, a horrible, horrific mistake was made. This district will do all that it can to get us back on track and continue moving everyone forward. At this time, let me introduce to you our interim superintendent, Ms. LaShaka Moore.
Before I begin, the interim superintendent is a Black woman. I think that says something. I think that as Black people, when something like this happens, we have to jump on this as quickly as possible to mitigate as much damage, especially in a state like Florida. But the thing is that the worst part is that the damage was already done. Let's let her cook.
Good morning. As Cheryl Macero stated, the purpose of this is really to offer an apology to our students, to our families, all of our families, and to this community. And that's where we want to start, with acknowledging our heartfelt regard, because this should not have happened, but it did. And as the interim superintendent of Flagler Schools, it is my responsibility to identify why did this happen. We do have an investigation that is ongoing at this time, and we will continue to move forward as we get additional information at the conclusion of the investigation. My appeal is to our families and to this community that we continue to work together in order to help each other and improve the academic performance of all of our students here in Flagler County. Our theme as a school district this year is Flagler Forward. That means excellence and service for all of our students. We make no excuses of what happened. we offer our apology and we offer actionable actions for us to move forward in supporting our students, supporting our schools, and supporting this community. On next week, Tuesday, we are going to offer a community forum. We have already have confirmation from many of our local community organizations, including the NAACP, African American Mentoring Program, and other local organizations that are committed to working with Flagler schools as we improve the outcomes for all of our students. And so I ask, if you are a member of this community and you would like to be a part of this forum, please reach out to me directly so that we can get you connected and we can begin the necessary work to ensure that we don't end in this place ever again. I will offer an opportunity for any questions.
So that was the apology. I'm sure that a lot of parents appreciate that apology. And really, there needs to be training and reflection for people of every profession, no matter what, especially regarding how Black people are treated. It sucks because we live in the state of Florida. And by the way, no comment from Ron DeSantis on this issue, of course. So yeah, I'm just going to give my final thoughts on this. Telling 10-year-olds that they are the problem for low standardized test scores is abdicating responsibility and racist. If you want these kids to do better, then teach them better. If you want to teach them better, then pay teachers better. Fund schools better. Stop doing funding based on regional property tax and make it more equitable across the board. Ultimately, this requires a change in the system.